Okay, good morning, everybody. Hello. Good morning. How are we all doing? Good, awesome. Welcome to the May Creative Mornings Edinburgh event. I hope everybody is suitably caffeinated. We've got plenty more, so please do help yourself throughout the morning. My name's Rebecca. I'm part of the Creative Mornings Edinburgh team, and we are here this morning at the wonderful Melting Pot. I'm going to invite Helen up here just before we start to tell us a little bit more about where we are and what the Melting Pot are all about.
Thanks. Hello. It's very early for me. I don't normally do early starts, so if I make no sense, I apologise. But just to say really a massive welcome. The Melting Pot's obviously been in Edinburgh for 14 years, I'm looking at Shabby, but we moved into this space a year ago after we had to close down for our own space because of, as you can imagine, the pandemic. But yeah, we're really pleased to be here. It's a partnership with Foundation Scotland, so we've got lots of lovely spaces to co-work, but also part of my role is about getting more events, building the community, both externally and internally. So if you work or are part of an organisation that you want to come and use the space in some way, then come and grab me afterwards and we can have a chat. But it's just really amazing to have Creative Mornings here. And you've got donuts, breakfast, like a win. So yeah, I hope you enjoy your time. Anyone who's staying afterwards for the desk, Shabby, our community coordinator, will be able to kind of tell you a bit more about how that works and give you a tour and stuff. So thanks, enjoy.
Thank you. Yes, so welcome to everybody in the room, welcome to everybody who is watching online on our online stream as well. If CM, so you can do that and kind of show people what we're all about. So Creative Mornings, many Creative Mornings that are happening around the globe in 223 cities, 67 countries, thousands of attendees per is creative. So whether you follow a creative discipline in your day job or if it's something that you love to do as a hobby or on the side, doesn't matter. You are here because you love creativity, you love community, and you love shouting about all the wonderful things that are happening in Edinburgh. So thank you so much for being here today. And Daisy as well. So feel free to grab us, have a chat afterwards. We are all here to say hello. So every is all about taking a moment to be still, to be in the present, to feel the air on the back of your neck, to hear the birds singing, to hear the traffic and the ambulances and the fire engines roaring up Lothian Road, depending on where you are, and to just be here in the now. And we hope that this morning is going to provide you for a bit of a moment of reflection, a chance to be together with our two wonderful speakers that we've got today. Creative Mornings, as a global organisation, is sponsored by MailChimp. I'm sure if you are a freelancer or a small business, have maybe used MailChimp. They provide lots of marketing services for small businesses around the world, and we have to shout them out at every event because they do amazing work supporting the global Creative Mornings movement. And this month, Asha from the Spit It Out Collective. So I'm going to invite Asha up here and tell you a little bit more about what they do. So if you want to come up. Lovely. So Spit It Out Collective, you are an award-winning organisation aiming to build connections, provide a platform for discussions around trauma and healing, but through a creative lens. Is that right? So a lot of the work you do is around subjects like consent, sex ed, racism, mental illness, body image, lots of things like that, which are also often portrayed as taboo and kind of inaccessible and not able to speak about them. So yeah, you're going to speak about a little bit about what you're doing now and also more about what Spit It Out is all about. Afterwards, we're going to open the floor to questions, but I'm going to hand over to Asha.
Hello, I'm Asha. I made this slide at 2 a.m. this morning because I'm very busy and that's the only time I had to do it. So it's very then, actually. I put a lot of then in there and then now, because that's what comes after then. But Spit It Out began. Who are we? You've just literally said this exact thing, really. We're a small charity, embryonic, really just begun. We got our charity status in July last year. Who really focus on using like creative outlets to talk about things that can lead to trauma or to talk about mental health in general, or just about life, because as Rebecca said, everyone is creative and there's creativity in everything we do, whether that even just be the way that we breathe, the way that we walk. Like life in general is creative and also very traumatic. Even being born is trauma. So we're born into it, and we think it's really important to link the two and see that trauma is a natural part of life and something we actually just need to find ways to deal with through creativity. We began in 2019 when my friend Leah, who's not here because she might have COVID, approached me, and she had seen me performing. She'd seen the way that I talked about my experience with sexual trauma, and she wanted to make a documentary about it because she's a documentary filmmaker. And she then followed me around for like a year, everywhere I went, even to India when I was like, I'm leaving this country, I need to go to the sea. And she was like, well, I'm coming. And BBC actually paid for her to come, lucky. And we made a documentary called Spit It Out, which BBC commissioned and showed on BBC Scotland 3 times over the last 3 years. And I'm going to show you a clip from it now. Trigger warnings, I talk about rape, but in a very casual way. This link. This is me. Saying the word, I shouldn't have to whisper it because people are around. I shouldn't have to whisper it because you're sitting there in front of me and you've never heard it before. I shouldn't be ashamed to say it. I have been raped. You know, you've got a plan always. I've always thought, if this happens to me, this is what I'm going to do. Saying if a zombie apocalypse was to come, I'd know how to get fucking out of my house. I'd know what to do. If I was going to be raped, I'd know what to do. And even now that it's happened once, I'm thinking I'll know what to do next time because it's happened once before. So next time, this is what's going to happen. I just don't believe that I will do that, because how can you ever know how you're going to react? Especially if it's someone that you trust. That's just like, you're somebody that I'm trusting and you're doing this. That's even more scary. Especially if it's someone that you trust. That's just like, you're somebody that I'm trusting and you're doing this. That's even more scary. So the documentary talks about how I use spoken word and rap to explore themes of sexual assault and abuse, and then as life goes on, more and more trauma comes, and I continue to write it out. And the way that it makes me feel when I perform in front of people about these experiences is such a release. And it's the same with Leah. She created this documentary using her own experience as well. There's animations throughout created by an animator called Nissan Yetkin that also explores her experiences, and they're all so interlaced. And I think that the majority of women in any space can say that they have in some way been sexually assaulted. Even the majority of any person in any space can say that in some way they have probably been sexually assaulted. And we think that as it's a natural part of life, we need to open up those conversations. So if you do want the documentary, just let me know and I'll send it to you. So then, 2020, we became a collective of all female and non-binary people who all have different outlets, different creative practices, and we came together and just we wanted to start putting on events. So we created our first event, and it was in Paradise Palms at the very beginning of 2020. And it was amazing. It was a full show, there was performances, there was just so much talk and like open conversation around the subject of consent. And then the pandemic happened. And our whole plans of what we wanted from our charity, kind of like from our collective, fell through because we couldn't actually do these live events. So we started going online, and we created a huge online following of people, which is still there today, which we love. Doing events that were spoken word events. We collaborated with lots of local other organisations and stuff. And then we created a zine. So it was 4 issues that are all around consent, abortion, sexual trauma, other things like that. My words are going to go. Which you can find on our website if you want to read them as well. And then we created a podcast, a series of 6 episodes that were anonymous testimonies of people's experiences with consent. And those were not only people who had suffered sexual trauma, but those who had perpetrated sexual trauma. One of them was. And that really started us thinking how important it was to have those people's voices in this conversation, because without them being included, nothing is actually going to make a change. There's going to be no full sustainable change if we don't have the unmarginalised and the perpetrators within this conversation, which I'll get to in a bit. And then we started doing panels and stuff, which was really fun, thanks to Women Being and loads of other organisations. And we started realising this could be so much more than just a collective of artists. This could be an actual thing. So through 2021 online, we did the I campaign, which was I Consent, which is all about consent. Not only sexual consent, but consent in our own bodies, talking about abortion rights and just body rights. I Feel, which is about mental health. I Respect, which has now changed, but I Respect, which was about identity and connection to our cultures and stuff. And then I Fuck, which is about sex, which we're just putting our campaign out to get, again, it's coming out this year. And then I Stand, which is about activism. And we did a series of like podcasts, of one-to-one conversations, resources. There's so much information on our Instagram and on our website if you want to look at it, all about these different subjects and how people explore them using creativity. And then we did a t-shirt campaign, this t-shirt here, called I Consent. And we took couples, I'm one of them. We really started from home at the beginning. We took couples that were unconventional couples. So the first couple are a gay couple who are best friends but have slept together, but they're just best friends. The second couple are a queer couple who have never had sex but go to many sex parties together. And the third couple are ex-lovers. And so we explored their relationships with consent and did interviews and photo shoots and released them about the different ways that people can connect through relationships, and also why consent in all formats are important in those different relationships. And we collaborated with a local organisation called Paiute, which is a local skate brand in Edinburgh, who have a huge following of majority so young white males who aren't our usual audience, aren't people that really want to have those conversations around consent, probably do, but don't like have the spaces to do it. And so because we ended up collaborating with them, we ended up getting a whole new following of people who wanted to have those conversations. And now I'll walk through the streets and see some skater going down the street wearing my top, I'm like, he consents. And then last year, we levelled up. We registered as a charity in July, which was very hard. I've been in the charity sector for 11 years now. I've worked in, I know I look really young, but I'll actually be 30 this year. I've worked in the third sector since I was 18, but I don't really know it very well. Like I don't know how the upper parts of it work. I've just worked as a lower person in it for so long, and Leah's never worked in it before, so we both are on a complete learning curve and trying to figure out how do we do this, like what do we do, how do we make things very legal and not like scam our own charity. So we've been working closely with like Oscar and other organisations to help us figure it out, and we're getting mentors from different places as well. And then we began our meetups. So we began our first thing that wasn't just putting on an event. Now on a monthly basis, every last Monday of the month, we have a group come together, August 21 Cafe in Southside, which are another partner of ours who give us their space and free coffee. And we've started putting on, at the start it was just people hanging out in a space and me running a host of games because I love doing games and workshops and stuff. And it's really progressed now, in the now, which I'll tell you about in a bit. And we started a magazine. We collaborated with a local artist called Hamish Gibson, and we've released our first issue. This is it here. It's called Phlegm magazine. The zine itself before was called the Phlegm zine, and this one's all about medical bias. So we have like poetry and testimonies and pictures and images all about how people have had negative or positive experiences, but probably negative experiences within the medical industry or talking to doctors. So if you want that, you can get it online, or you can read it online, or I have some copies for you. I only have like 3 though, because they're expensive. And then we started getting funding, which was so exciting. It's something we've never done before. We really had to like figure out how to write funding applications. It's really hard. I'm not a rigid writer. I only write creatively, so I'm not good at it. But we now managed to, since July, get funding from the National Lottery, Creative Scotland, Culture Edinburgh, NHS Thrive, People Postcode, Foundation Scotland, Tudor Trust, and the Cora Foundation, and which is amazing because now we have an office in Summerhall, which is super exciting. It just looks like my living room because I've moved in there. And we've started to figure it out. So now we've realised what we actually want to do and who we actually are, and that is 4 pillars. It's community care, self-compassion, transformative justice, and cathartic creativity. So cathartic creativity is our like roof of our pillars. And we want to use self-compassion, so the importance of looking after yourself within these spaces, as well as looking after your community, and then also considering transformative justice within all of those aspects and creating some type of creative outlet to cathartically heal and talk about these conversations. And the importance of having transformative justice in this is, as I said before, that the marginalised spaces are so important. We really need these spaces for people that have suffered from trauma, who are dealing with trauma, who life is a daily trauma for, but we also need to include those unmarginalised voices in that conversation, because without them, nothing is going to change. There will be we have so many of these spaces now that are so important and so great, but we want that space to also have the white male walk in and be like, oh, I hear you, because they're not going to hear it if they're not exposed to that stuff. So now we're putting on a festival. Is that so? Ooh. So now we're putting on a festival. Me and Leah have been working tirelessly, morning and night, to put on a festival across Glasgow and Edinburgh and online to ensure those that can't join in every day, these nice things coming back together, can still take part in the festival. It's 14 different venues, 48 different events, 40-something different events that keep growing. Every day someone else comes up to us and we're just adding it more and more into the brochure. I'll just show you the trailer now, and then I'll talk a bit more about it. Saying the word, I shouldn't have to I'm actually in a band, an all-female rap group called The Honey Farm, and that's one of our songs, so every time it comes on I'm just like, I'm getting ready. I feel like the words are coming and I'm like, oh no, it's just a trailer. Sorry, I've done it from the beginning again. So the festival is starting in 3 weeks now, which is really scary. It's coming. And we have incredible partnerships with Summer Hall and CCA in Glasgow, who've given us so much of their spaces for free. We've got, as I said, 14 different venues across Glasgow and Edinburgh, so there are lots of little things going on around. There's live performances at Stereo in Glasgow and the Wee Red Bar here, also poetry nights at the Alchemy Experiment in Glasgow and Assembly Roxy here. There's a myriad of incredible workshops, notably the Better Sex workshops from Ruth Elliott. She's created a load of different games and ways for us to actually consider what sex really is and how we consider it and why the patriarchy has made us think different things about it. And also how to talk about sex while having it in general conversations and stuff. I would really highly recommend coming along to that if you get a chance. There's boundaries workshops, there's self-compassion workshops, there's workshops on learning how to DJ, on skateboarding run by the queer collective Skateboobs in Edinburgh. They'll be in Glasgow and Edinburgh doing art with young queer people, but also anyone is welcome to come, and learning how to skate for the first time. There's exhibition opening from Nissan Yetkin, Souls in the Thread, which will be at the Alchemy Experiment in Edinburgh, and that's going to have a full lineup of non-binary and female artists performing, and also it looks at femininity over the years, and she's created a huge tapestry that's hand sewn that really looks into what the feminine is. We just have a full trans lineup, off-cut and Banshee Labyrinth of incredible noise artists, if you're into that kind of thing. It's hard to listen to for me because it's my friend Callie curated it, and she comes off the stage covered in blood every time. I can't. I'm just wow, that's so much. But there's a space for it, and we're excited to be hosting that kind of performance. And my most notable thing for the festival is one of them, which will be at the LTD Inc. on the 23rd of June, which is at the top of Leith Walk at Brunswick Street, that you're all very welcome to come and take part in. And one of them is an exhibition made by Spit It Out that will be talking about transformative justice. So it has testimonies from people who have perpetrated sexual violence and those who have suffered sexual violence, has a photo exhibition of people who are recovering from sexual violence, and also a noise installation and performance from Callie, who is part of Spit Out as well. And it's just going to be something that's not really, I've never seen done before, or never really heard these things that I'm listening to said in that sort of way. I just think it's going to be really interesting. But there are brochures in the kitchen and on that table over there for the festival. Everything's pay what you feel or free. We want it to be as accessible as possible. The majority of the venues are accessible, or there is accessibility on there. BSL is available everywhere on request, and we just want everyone to come along. This is our first time and we're really not very well known yet, so it's just really pushing it out there. So please do take a brochure. If you scan the back, you get straight to the Eventbrite, and just come to anything you like. Thank you.
Asha, thank you so much for that. We are going to open the floor to questions, if that's okay. Sarah is at the back of the catch box. So if anybody has any questions, can you stick your hand up and Sarah will come to you. Yeah, thank you so much for that, for sharing about that. I sound so excited. Question here.
Myself and Leah really have been working tirelessly, and we're in our crisis budget with the fund. We didn't get enough funding to put on the actual event, but of course we want to put on it anyway, so we're just doing most of the work for free, as we have been doing since 2019, because we are really passionate about the project. And then we both have to work our side jobs at the same time, our actual jobs. And also we're both creative, so we're both trying to create our own she's creating a documentary right now. I'm trying to put out my second album. I work in the charity sector for a full-time job in a charity. She's been working for Mental Health Scotland, and then we're both doing this on the side, and we're just going to keep doing it until it comes together.
And are you at Rock the Boat next week?
I am performing at Rock Boat next week.
There we go. Opportunity to also
I'm performing
advertise
in many up and coming performances, many. So if you want to come and see me perform, it's at my website. There's like 8 different performances coming up soon. And please do come to the one at Stereo in Glasgow, which is in the Eye Festival. That's my one to see. Cool.
This is just a workout for me.
Is it working? Hello. No, still not working. I'll shout too. I am a man of a certain age, so have you considered how to speak to non-allies? How to get? I mean, I completely on board. I've recently moved up from London, relocated. However, how are you going to talk to people who don't know, who don't sympathise, who don't understand?
I truly believe it is exposure that will help people understand. So it is just about bringing them into the space in any capacity. So as part of the Eye Festival, we even have just like one-to-one boxing or like PT training that is more accessible to someone who doesn't want to have an actual conversation, but you're bringing them into a space that is made specifically for mental health conversations. And even though they're just going in there to do a workout, then suddenly there will be at some point something brought up in conversation by the person running it, which might spark something in them. And just creating those spaces, I think, will actually, that they're welcome into, and letting them know they're welcome into, and that Spit It Out is we don't want to hold judgments against people, because we all have grown up and learn from our environments, from who we're around, and so you need to be given the opportunity to, what's the word? To like take back what you've done. What's the word for that? Like take accountability. You need to be given the opportunity to take accountability what you've done, and that might take like 3 or 4 tries. I have many people in my life who refuse to hear what I have to say, but I'm not gonna just drop them like that, because I know that the more they hear it, the more that they are exposed to people, the more they will learn. Especially if they get finally exposed to like other queer people in their lives. I think a lot of people are quite in a bubble where the queer people stay in a bubble, the cis people stay in a bubble, the rest of us kind of float between, and we're like, we could do both. And if we can like bring those 2 people together to be like, look how you can learn from each other to find comfortability in everyday society, then the good will come.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, like how it was for you watching the documentary back, with you talking about such personal things.
The first time it was quite weird, because I was sitting in a room with loads of people, but I was just excited. Like my cats are in it a lot. Like once you watch the documentary, you'll see I'm not the kind of person who I do obviously like deal with my trauma, and like I get upset, and I used to have agoraphobia. I used to like lock myself in my house and not be able to leave and stuff. But with creative outlets, it helps me like expose that, and I really do believe that the more honest you are about things, the easier they are to get over, because people may judge you, but majority won't, and we're just so scared of judgment from other people that's why we don't share. But actually, like, I know that if I was to tell you this whole room full of people something about myself that was personal, you would consider it as like an actual personal thing, and you wouldn't put judgment on me for it. And I've just taught myself that. I've just been like, people aren't judging me, and I need to stop judging myself. And I just want to expose that to other people. Like, you're judging yourself more than people are judging you.
So cool.
I just wanted to say that thank you very much. I think you're very brave, and I think it's really healthy that you're sharing your experience. So my question will be, what will be an advice that you could give to someone that have gone through a similar experience? It might be younger or older person.
Come to my events. Spend time with other people who have experienced similar things to you. Talk about it and be honest about it, and when people aren't willing to listen, talk to someone else about it. Just continue to move on and find that space that is for you, because there are a million trillion different spaces out there, and there will be one that fits.
today.
Thank you.
Perhaps after you've got the festival out of the way, would you be interested in sort of making links and networks globally? Because I've just come off working on a very big project with lots of different groups around the world doing really quite similar things to this. So if it would be helpful to be put in touch with such people after the festival.
Yeah. Yeah, after June we're free. Well, not really. July, I mean, they are making another documentary, but after July we're a lot free. But also check out, we're making a documentary about a homeless association in Edinburgh, and we're going to go around, not in Edinburgh, in Glasgow, we're going to go around doing like writing workshops around Scotland with different women that have suffered from sexual trauma or homelessness. And so I think it's going to be, we're going to start the conversations in Scotland first, but then I'm so free to move around the world for it.
Do you have? I'll send you an email.
Yeah, do. Yeah. The Spit It Out project at gmail.com. Cool, thank you so much.
Yeah, huge thank you. And
Yeah, another round of applause for Asha. Thank you.
I'll let you grab a seat.
I'm not going to stay around too long because I'm doing
But there are flyers for the Eye Festival all around the room, so please grab one. And like you say, there's a QR code, isn't there, to scan and go straight to the event page. That's all free. As if we needed any more incentive, I mean. Thank you so much, Asha. Lovely. So, lovely. So we're now going to move on to our second speaker of this morning. Just while Susie gets her mic on, we've got Susie Rose Dalton with us, who is an artist and ceramicist based in Glasgow, and her work is all about temporality and creating, giving. Audience as well.
Very glamorous assistant, Javi's I don't know if there's enough clay for everybody because it's a bigger grip than I was expecting, but we have just like little bits that people can grab just if they want to like play with it during the talk. So yeah, great, thank you. Cool, thanks very much. Yeah, it's a funny thing, like seeing Xavi get hand out on a plate as well, like after the donuts, like don't confuse the two. And yeah, sorry, no clay for people watching from home. But hi everybody, I'm Susie Rose Dalton. I'm an artist and ceramicist working with clay. Yeah, whenever Creative Mornings asked me to come along and speak today on the theme of now, I thought, like, to be fair, first of all, I thought like it's actually quite cruel to ask a Northern Irish person to say the word now again and again and again. It was like, of all the words, but okay. But then whenever I started thinking about the concept of like what we could talk about in the now, in this moment, I was like, Jesus, there's a fair bit that we could be covering. There's a fair bit that we could be getting into, because there's a lot about now that is like pretty overwhelming. I don't know if I'm the only person who feels that. I think there's so much in terms of like the demands on our attention, the kinds of things that we're going through at the moment that, you know, you could spend a lot of time talking about. But I think in the context of that kind of overwhelm and that kind of intensity, along these lines already, kind of where we are. But just to kick us off, if you could fit the whole of the Earth's history onto a 24-hour clock, whereabouts do There's been an awful lot. In those couple of seconds that humans have been around, an awful lot's happened too, because we're talking in roughly about 200,000 years that kind of humans as we might recognize or know them have been walking the earth. in that time, in those kind of 200,000 years that we have been roaming the earth, so much has happened, so much has changed in terms of the whole civilizations that have come and gone, and the languages and the ways of living, the sort of the transients, the sort of the different ways that we've kind of set up shop, set up our communities related to one another. So much has taken place in that time period, and there's nowhere that you really have to look further for evidence of that than clay as a material and kind of the clay record that we have to look at. So the way that I came to clay as an artistic thing and an artistic practice was through studying archaeology in university, actually in this city. So I moved to Edinburgh about 11 years ago to do that. And the thing that really grabbed me, I think, about clay in archaeology, like in terms of kind of where that sits in our much bigger, like the human history, is the fact that like you can see so much of so many different layers of society just from this one material. The thing about clay is that it doesn't really like degrade or change over time. Like once it's fired, you kind of have just like, it's pretty set. Like in terms of the archaeological record, so many other things like, wood will rot away, metals will corrode. Once clay is fired, it basically just stays the same. It's like kind of weirdly indestructible. And it means that whenever we find clay, whenever like archaeologists find clay or find ceramics kind of in the record, they're actually kind of very similar to how they looked whenever the last person who touched them or who made them, like how they looked then. So we can end up getting a perspective on things like 30,000 years ago, what people were capable of making 15,000 years ago. Like you can see from these that people weren't just coming to clay then. These are some of the earliest examples we have in the record, but people obviously knew what they were doing with this material, and people were using it for like expressive means and to kind of capture stuff about being alive at that time. So there was something about that, I think, that just like really got to me, I guess, in studying that subject. I think as well something that I really love about clay is that with other kind of crafts and art forms, you end up often only seeing like the kind of most elite tastes and the sort of the most like the things that are preserved and protected, like, are generally things that kind of like sit with people who have the most power and wealth. But with clay, that's really not the case. Like you do have your most like ornate, beautiful whatever ceramics that kind of depict like scenes of excess. Like I think, these are probably quite familiar sort of ornate Greek vases. But then you have these kind of really everyday pieces of ceramic that show kind of what everyday life was like. And they're still beautiful pieces, like these kind of baby bottles where tests were carried out on this to see what kind of things like people were like, what kind of foods were used in these sorts of things. And like these are full of like animal milk and made in this kind of like childlike size, which is like, oh, of course there needed to be baby bottles 3,000 years ago, like of course there did. But seeing this kind of stuff just connects us, I think, to like our modern day experience, the most mundane parts of our modern day experience, including complaints letters and like exercise books. Like this is one of the earliest or the earliest on record complaints letter. Someone just like sounding off. You can see it's like quite a full letter as well, like sounding off about a shipment of copper that he received which wasn't up to scratch. So and that's 3,750 years ago. This is like an exercise book basically where people practicing their handwriting. We've also got around this time from this area as well in Mesopotamia, we see letters being exchanged between like partners whenever one of them is away traveling for work, and it's just like really everyday concerns of being like, our youngest daughter is growing up very fast and like the business isn't doing so well, you should come back soon kind of thing. It's like lots of things that are just instantly recognizable, I think, and like very connecting to kind of where we are in our current day, and like I say, also represents something that goes way beyond like elite kind of parts of society. It's just like it's sort of every part of existence, I think, can be recorded in clay and can be found later to build up this much bigger picture. Because I think like there's a whole sort of variation on different kinds of forms here, like whether it's sculpture or like depictions on the sides of you know, vases and cooking utensils and that kind of stuff, or just like administrative things. All of these things can actually build up to give us like a really rich picture of the kinds of things that, or, you know, of past societies and the ways that people lived before now, and the ways people, like what people prioritized as well. And I think that's the thing that through time it's really helpful to get a bit of perspective on, because sometimes, like, I was just really minded hearing Asha speak about, you know, the Spit It Out project. Like, there's a narrative sometimes, I think, in the present day that, like, the things that are happening now, there's no precedent for, or kind of the rights that are being afforded to certain groups of people now. It's like, this is the first time that's ever happened. And that's not always the case. Like, we see so much change in ceramics around things like gender expression, gender identity. We see representations of non-binary identities from thousands of years ago. We see, you know, queer scenes on the sides of Greek vases. We see so many different things that kind of actually, like, harken back to being like, oh, okay, there's a real ancientness in so much of what is seen to be like, oh, it's very modern, like, now. So there's something about that I think is really powerful to kind of hold on to in the now as well. And I think ultimately for me, like, clay as a material is something that is just very human. Like, there are kind of two elements to this for me, I think, in clay as a material. Like, one of them, something about clay being kind of forever transformable. Like, before it's fired, you can, as you're doing now, you can make any kinds of shapes. Then you can, like, scrunch it up and start again. You might have to add water at some point, but you can, like, basically, you know, make an infinite amount of things with the same amount of clay. If you even make something and let it dry and leave it there for like 10 years, if you just add water, then you're back to the start again. Like, there's something about that that's kind of constantly renewable, constantly transformable, that I feel like is quite a human thing. But the other kind of, like, in some ways kind of juxtaposing like characteristic of clay is that it can be so permanent, that it can create such a kind of record or contribution. And I think that's something that, like, you know, it really boils down to why I find it so fascinating, is whenever we find fired clay from the past, like, there's going to have been a human reason for that coming into existence, whether that's art or playing or administration or whatever it is. Like, there is a reason why this has happened. Like, it's humans doing it for human reasons, and that reason often outlives the person who's made it as well. And that's kind of what we come across then, like, potentially many thousands of years later. And in my own work, I try and work with kind of these two, like I say, sometimes juxtaposing things about clay, like that kind of record keeping and that renewal. So this is a piece that I made around this time last year. So it was kind of coming out of lockdown, and I was feeling very, I think, just like really keen to try and record, like, in that sort of sensitive spot. I think after coming through that first year, being like, oh my God, like, we're going back into the summer, and, like, thank goodness, but how do I kind of record, like, some of the transformation that I've felt during that time, and I've seen a lot of other people around me experience as well. And for me, like, my experience was very much about, like, kind of being, like, I lived alone, I was working from home, I lived in a small flat, like, and I was sort of in this very small space, but I was really, like, enamored with very comforted by the sun coming in every day. And even, like, in the dead of winter, like, the very weak sun coming in every day for like 2 minutes. But it was just such a comforting presence, I think, to kind of, to see that and to track it and to sort of, like, feel the time passing in that way as well. So what I wanted to do was, I ended up making a porcelain tile for every single day of lockdown to that point, which to that point had been 459 days. I don't know how many it is in total, but to that point it had been. And I coated all of these tiles in cyanotype ink, which turns blue in the sunlight, and it gets, like, a darker and darker blue the stronger the sun is, or the longer it's in the sun. But I basically, like, coated my entire living space with these tiles once I'd made them, and it meant that I could record, like, the sun and the shadows and the movement of the sun coming into my space as well. So you can see the kinds of, like, yeah, the sort of the shadow and the sort of, like, some of the movement of the sunlight whenever this was done, like, on this one here. So it kind of I tried to capture, I guess, just some of that, like, the isolation, but also that sort of I don't know, engaging with your surroundings in a way that I just wouldn't have had reason to, I guess, otherwise. And for me, like, to have this as a record, I think really kind of captures some of that, the lightness, the kind of the dark and the light of that time in the most literal sense, and I guess metaphorically as well. But it felt important to kind of like commit that to something at the time that it felt most pressing. In more recent work, I've been looking at like that powerful renewal that clay has. So this is a piece that exhibited a couple of months ago in Glasgow, and I made a bunch of shirts out of porcelain and let them dry, so you can see they're quite hard there. But over the course of the exhibition, I had them kind of set up under like a tap that I'd engineered to just kind of like drip again and again and again. It's on a repetitive for the whole kind of 4 weeks of it. And over the course of the exhibition, like a hole sort of bore down through the center of the shirts. Eventually all broke down to kind of become just, plastic clay again, to sort of the raw state. Now I have a big bag of like liquid porcelain like in my studio that I will eventually turn into something else. But it felt like a really important exercise in kind of, I don't know, like engaging with order in some ways, or kind of like, creating something that was quite set and then like letting something passive, letting time engage with that in a way that like completely transforms it and returns it to something else. So I think this is kind of like where a lot of like what I think is important in the context of now comes in, because I think for me anyway, it feels like there's more importance than ever in there being like a sense of possibility or a sense of renewal now, and a sense of kind of like possible transformation as well, that it's not just kind of out of everyone's, or like, parts of it are out of everyone's control, I guess, in some respects, but like there's something about possibility rather than kind of things being taken out of human hands. There's something that like we can actually engage with in a much more real-time sense. And I think like in terms of like, with the clay that you have in your hands, what I love about it is that you can literally see transformation in your hands. Like you sit down with clay and before you know it, it's completely changed shape, it's completely changed form. There's like, like I say, you can like turn it back to something else as quickly as you want. But there's something about that kind of like tangible sense of having effect on something that I think is like a very useful thing to engage with, kind of in all senses. And I think like going back to kind of what I was saying at the start, to zoom out and see, where we are in a much bigger scheme of things, I think that can be really useful to remember just like where we sit on in this kind of like fleeting moment on a much larger time scale. Like I find that really useful, especially whenever I do something embarrassing, or I'm like scared of showing something to someone that I've made, and I'm like, oh God, I hope it's not terrible. And I'm like, okay, I'm alive for like a second, like maybe I can just get over myself and do this. But that I don't think it's useful to only think like that, because we do still have so much significance in the actions that we take kind of in those fleeting moments, I think, as well. And I think that's kind of like, we have a lot of reason, in the current day to be aware of the impact our actions have. Like I think we're kind of really more aware than we ever have been, just how kind of fragile some things are, and how much collective individual action or impact can have. But we can see, all around us just how much like humans do transform things and how much humans change things over time. Like again, just like I said, like in your hands, you can just change something like pretty simply. And really be minded of that, hearing Ash's talk as well, of just like that kind of human power, like that staying up till 2 a.m. to get things done. Like there's so much about that kind of individual and collective action that actually has these far strong impacts, like way beyond individual lifespans. Again, like I work in outside of art, whenever I'm not doing this kind of stuff, I work in the gender-based violence movement, and I see it there all the time. Like I see kind of what these individual actions have done in terms of differences for communities, like for Scotland, and for kind of individual lives, particularly for for people who've experienced gender-based violence. Like the differences that people who work in the sector make to people's lives is massive. And I think basically like, what I kind of want to just like draw together is just, I feel, you know, in terms of where we are similar in some ways to clay as a material, I think we have this power for adaptability and transformation and for flexibility as well in terms of like how we live our lives. But I also think we have this power for permanence and for legacy and for contribution and impact as well. So we have those two kind of juxtaposing things in ourselves too. And I think it's like, you know, to think about where we are in the now, sometimes it's helpful to look back, you know, at these kind of records that other people have left, to think about how we are spending our time, think about the things that are important to us now, currently, and think about kind of the records that we want to leave behind as well. And there's so much about what we create, and whether that's like actual things that we create, or it's in relationships or in communities, whatever it is, there's so much about that comes down to what we're going to leave behind. So that's it. Thank you.
Susie, thank you so much for that. I'm going to open the floor up to questions. If anybody has a question, and we've got the catch box at the back again. Lovely. There we go.
Thank you very much for your exhibition. For me, at least, it was really interesting that you said that there was, from 1,000 years ago, someone complaining about something. I think that's really present. Do you have any upcoming exhibition that we could go and see?
I don't. Well, I'm waiting to hear back from some. Classic. Yeah. So I don't have anything officially right now. So, but I do have a website where I put everything on. So. Yeah, if anyone wants to come along to something in the future, then keep an eye on that. Thank you.
Would you say that clay is a better indication of human history than actual text itself?
Yeah, I would, because I think for that reason that, like, you know, what's that saying of like history favors the fortunate, or yeah, history favors the elite, basically. Like, that's where clay doesn't. And I think it's like, it's so helpful to get a much rounder picture. I think there's so many things that are omitted in written text because of political agendas and because of where the power sits. But like I say, no one like realized just how much clay would like exist for thousands of years and be something that people could, you know, draw lots of conclusions from in the future. So that's where we actually get, I think, a more accurate picture of previous societies. So, yeah.
Sorry, you keep being out of my line of sight.
No, you're grand. The complaint letter from however many thousands of years ago, was it fired, or was it just dry? So the person went to the hassle, like, so the time it would take to make and then fire.
But we know these people, right?
If it had just been left to dry, then the person who received it would be like, I'll just add some water, grumpy reply back to complaint letter, and then send it back again.
Yeah, no, it's been fired. So it's like, that was a very, that was a common thing, like at this time, that there'd just be these kind of like, you know, very like regular firings, and quite low firings, but enough to keep it, like to vitrify it so it does stay in the record. But yeah, basically like these letters would be traveling quite a distance, because he was this person was trying to complain to like a merchant that had traded with him like thousands of miles away or whatever, and so you have to kind of fire it for that to make its journey, because you don't want to get that complaint letter there and it's all like broken up into loads of bits.
Sorry. Really loved that talk. It was so beautiful. And I'm really curious, like, do you see a movement to kind of bring back and like unearth the histories that have always been there in clay, but that have been sort of erased or hidden? Is there a movement for that now?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's some really interesting ceramicists working with working in really political ways with clay, and I think that I think this is where ceramics for me is just such a kind of like elemental material. You know, there's something really powerful in the fact that you can literally just dig it out of the ground, and that's why it does kind of offer this like much more holistic view, I think, of previous societies. And today I think there is connection with that it's kind of something that, like, you know, in theory anyone can kind of get their hands on. That being said, there is a funny movement, I think, at the moment with ceramics that, like, it's quite a bougie like hobby or something, and it's funny seeing that as a, you know, to see that kind of that change, or that kind of this most recent sort of iteration of it, whenever you think about how it was just an industry like 100 or 200 years ago. There was like these huge ceramic industrial kilns and stuff in Portobello and in Glasgow and in Kirkcaldy and all over the place, because it was just like another way of, like, yeah, producing loads and loads of materials. But now it's kind of this like a much more of a kind of like, yeah, luxury sort of pastime. So there definitely, in some ways it's less of that kind of inclusive material now, I think, but in theory there is still, you know, I think in the same way of like children playing with mud, there's still kind of like, it's a pretty accessible thing. But yeah, no, like I say, there are some really amazing ceramicists kind of who are engaging with that a lot more, like in a kind of like broader societal and political sense. And yeah, would love to like send you some Instagram links after this if you're interested. Cool.
We have a question online.
There we are. So Laura is saying that the cyanotype tiles was such a lovely concept in a creative and literal way. Was this your own personal creative way of getting through lockdown?
Getting through lockdown? Yeah, I honestly, like, I think if I hadn't had creative stuff during lockdown, like, it would have been really awful. And I mean, yeah, like, I feel very lucky to be relatively unscathed from it in general. But yeah, the creative thing was very much the thing that I kind of returned to. And there was I'm sure that's the case for lots of people in here, that there was a bit more time and space in some ways during that time to kind of like to hone in on some of your creative projects, like at home. I know not for everybody, like sometimes it was the opposite, but it gave me a bit of space, I think, to kind of get my my ducks in a row in terms of being like, what do I actually want to make? And like, I do have the time to do this now. And that the cyanotype tiles for me were kind of like the outcome of quite a lot of stuff that I've been working on before that. So I've been doing lots of like little cyanotype prints of things in my flat, just as kind of like trying to record all the things around me. And then I was like, maybe I can actually record just the light. And so yeah, it was a very useful way of getting through lockdown for sure.
You mentioned like, sorry, you mentioned play just before, and for me I think play is a huge part of just creativity in general, you know, something that gets forgotten. But do you think that ceramics gives you like a particularly greater amount of play that like leads to maybe more interesting forms of expression for you?
Yeah, I do. I think, again, like, it's that kind of ability to be like, oh, I don't like this, squash, like, go back to whatever it is. That's a crucial thing, I think, that lets you just sort of remove some of this kind of like, oh, I need to make something, I should like make something that I'm like very pleased about. You just get to kind of like disconnect from that and just play. Like, that's why I wanted to bring clay here today, because I think it's like engaging with it on a sort of theoretical level is really different to being like, oh yeah, it is fun. Like, it's nice to touch clay and to play with it. But I think it's like that, the play thing for me is a huge thing too, in terms of creativity, and such an important thing, I think, in this like longer term look at the world, where we see play like all through time. Like, for me, those little bottles are like really good examples of that, where like you don't need to make your baby bottles into little animals, but why not? Like, why would you not do that? I'm sure everyone's like happier for it. So yeah, I think the ceramics really lends itself well to play, for sure. Cool.
Susie, that's all but time for question line.
Great.
Thank you, and another massive round of applause for Susie and for
Asha as well. Thank you. I meant to say as well, if anyone wants to clean their hands, there are like wipes somewhere back there. And feel free to like leave your ceramic thing somewhere, or take them with you, or whatever. I want to take a little photo.
Awesome, thank you so much. Thanks. I know, I was conscious I was coming back to touch a laptop. I was like, maybe leave the clay. Amazing, thank you so much, Susie. So just before we go, a couple more things to tell you about from Creative Mornings. If you can't wait until the end of June for our next event, and we've got lots of exciting things going on at creativemornings.com/field trips. There are workshops, there are kind of Zoom calls, there's lots of things to look at from Creative Mornings chapters from all around the world. So you don't have to wait till June to get your creative fix. Also a reminder that for next month we'll be opening up our community minutes slot again. So if you or somebody you know has a project, an initiative, something or somebody that they want to shout about, we give people 60 seconds to come up here and talk about it at the end of the event. So if you would like a community minutes slot, drop us a line, edinburgh@creativemornings.com, and we'll have you up here at the end of next month's event. But yeah, all that remains is to say thank you so much to Susie, thank you to Asha, thank you to the Melting Pot for having us this morning. Thank you to the team and to all of you for being here. We will see you again on the 24th of June. Until then, have a great Friday and enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you again. Oh, please eat a donut, yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.